Okay, it is 8:30 p.m. It is Tuesday, December the 1st, 2020. And yes, it is 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. And I'm Professor Richard Wright. Welcome to another week number 4 of Introduction to Criminal Law. And I'll be with you sometime within the next hour, sharing information and details. I hope each of you had a good Thanksgiving. Got your assignments in. I do want to say that at the end of this week, any assignments from weeks 1 to 3, I will not be accepting unless previous arrangements have been made. So at the end of this week's assignment, which is Sunday, this Sunday coming up, that I will not be accepting weeks 1 to 3. That does not include discussion posts. I've had a few people to try to get extensions on discussion posts past the week, but I can't do that. The school has a rule, and it doesn't allow me to extend it because the absolute end for that week is Saturday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard. I do encourage students, whatever situation that they're in, to at least stop and do their discussion posts because they're pretty easy to do and pretty quick. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, and so let's scroll down. I did provide for you this video about adversity as a springboard to success. I also posted it on the course homepage as well, and you could click on here and you can see it as well, along with each week's discussion, recordings. And you can see this is week 4, and then we'll have 2 more lectures, and then the course will be over. Let's look at the course calendar. Hope you have a chance to listen to that video that I sent. It's pretty long, but it explains to you why I say adversity is the springboard to success. And you can see where we are here in this calendar. You can see that today is the 1st. We have 2 more weeks and the week ends. So your assignments for this week started yesterday. There's your assignments. I sent you chapter 8 of the textbook, and then your initial post is due tonight, obstruction of justice. And then your reply post on obstruction of justice is due Saturday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard. And then your written assignment, fleeing or eluding police. I give the details in the module and in the rubric. And then your key phrase is also due. Okay. And then Monday, so we have 2 more Mondays left after 2 more Mondays left after this week, the 7th and the 14th. Okay, let's go back to the course homepage. And here's your week 4 announcement. Crimes against government and public order, chapter 8 of the textbook. I sent you the PowerPoints. Then we're going to deal with the topics: domestic terrorism, obstruction of justice, resisting arrest, fleeing police, disorderly conduct, and then free speech as we conclude. And then I'll go over terms for practice for free speech or disorderly conduct, and then practice quiz. Then the obstruction of justice discussion post that I mentioned earlier, fleeing or eluding police, I mentioned earlier, and then complete the mid-quarter student survey, and then adversity as a springboard to success. You know more about that if you've looked at this this video, which you can watch anytime you get ready. It's on your course homepage, as well as I emailed it to you. It lets you know a lot about why I am the way that I am and why I feel the way I do towards students. So it's very important. Take some time, listen to it, and sit back, relax, and you can save it because you have a link that was sent to you as well. And it's on YouTube, so you can readily get it. You can't get it, though, unless you have the link, though. Unless I share the link or you have the link, and you can share the link with anybody you want. Okay. I do want to remind you that your written assignments that are submitted on Sundays are due to be graded every Friday by 11:59 p.m. Central Standard. I've kept that for weeks 1 and weeks 2 and plan on keeping the same thing for week 3. Okay, I had a student who asked, why does it take that long to grade an assignment? Because some people do turn them in earlier. Well, it's because I have so many students, and so I take the time to grade sometimes early, but most of the time I get them in on that Friday. Sometimes I go a little longer, but so far I've gone that way. And I grade by the rubric. I use the rubrics very seriously in terms of the biggest part of your grade. I also add things like if you don't have a cover sheet, I also add, which is actually part of APA. And also I grade you on if you, for example, don't have citations throughout the body of the paper. You'll throw one citation in. Citations support your statements, and that's what we talked about during the beginning of this course with APA. Okay, so now let's go and let's take a look at the assignments. So for the discussion post, this scenario is what you're going to use, and consider this in conjunction with what you know about Terry versus Ohio. That is a known as the famous stop and frisk case, and so you're going to respond to that in your initial post. What crime was about to be committed. Is lying about one's name a crime? If so, explain what crime has been committed. Explain your legal justification for temporary detention, and what can you demand during the temporary detention? Can you pat down for weapons, even if a person refuses? That is clearly what Terry versus Ohio is about. And then in your reply post, examine another student's post and defend your position. Okay, you already know about the guide that I mentioned for criminal justice for this course. Again, if you clicked on it, it opens it up, and it helps you to find information for each assignment about discussion posts. And then it tells you about written assignments, Grammarly, fine and statutes cases. But I also told you that if you go under the tab for paralegal, you can fast case. Click on that, and it also helps you to find cases, statutes, regulations. Remember, if you cite a case, I want the official citation, not use fine law or OYAs unless it's not available. But in most cases, our Supreme Court cases, and it will start out with a number, and then it'll say US, and then the second number. The first number is the volume of the book. The second number is the page in that book where the case starts, and then in parentheses, the year that the case was issued. And regulations, court rules, constitutions from all 50 states are found there. I think one of my students who was a paralegal student who used that. I didn't know about that because we don't use that because I don't teach paralegal classes. I do get a lot of students though who took paralegal classes. Okay, so you can utilize that to help you. Written assignment, fleeing or eluding police. This is a two-part assignment. I always encourage my students to run your papers through Grammarly. For example, if your flyer, and in this case here, it is a flyer, is going to be run through Grammarly second. And when I run it through Grammarly, I will, if the percentage is high, notice that your flyer, it requires that you can create your flyer from scratch, or if you prefer using the template, be sure to use appropriate sources. But just like your papers, I don't want you to cut and paste to make your flyer get the information, and it should be yours. So coming back to this is part 2, you play the role of a police officer, and you've been asked by your chief to create a training flyer. Okay, and at your agency, dealing with the vehicle pursuit policies. And there's some sample pursuit policies that you can use. You can also select a police policy of your choice from the internet. But be sure to cite, but do not copy and paste the information solely. Provide some explanation in your own. Okay? In your flyer, explain the elements of the statute that must be proven in fleeing or eluding police. Okay? Very important. So you're not using the same information above. You're using this complete, a one-page addressing the issues, dealing with the sample statute, and then you have the template you can use. Again, here's guides that can help you as well. All right. You can either attach it as a zip file. Some students attempt number 1, attempt number 2. That is probably not the best way to do it because the assignment grades for the full assignment. So the best way to do it, if you're not going to do a zip, is attach a second file to your first attempt. You can do that. You can do that. Okay. But this case, the U.S. Supreme Court case of Brower, has to do with this written assignment for first part. So let's go back. So we're going to deal with this two-part assignment. You're going to deal with a landmark case or landmark cases relating to Supreme applying laws to scenario and answer questions about the scenario. This is the case right here. And you're going to use this scenario. right here. So in it, you're going to answer the following questions. Remember, it's a minimum of 2 pages. You will lose points if you don't satisfy that. That's in the rubric as well. So let's take a look at the rubric. And it tells you 2-page minimum requirement, tells you what should be covered in the paper itself. And then this is the organizational structure right here. Remember, it's APA. You discover that because you can see it right here, APA. No Wikipedia or sources that are not credible. And then also remember, once again, there should be citations throughout the body of the paper, because a lot of your statements that you won't put citations or references, and you don't have to have every sentence, so, but the key thing is a reasonable amount based on that, and then your own writing. So you'll get basically 15 points for the content, 5 points for the grammar and the spelling and stuff, and then APA, another 5 points. So 15 points if you don't do a flyer and it doesn't meet the minimum page length. And again, I'll run it through Grammarly. Then, so if you run it through Grammarly and you see a high percentage, make sure you check the plagiarism box. I had a student that sent me a message saying that they saw 99%. I said, 99%, that's not good. 99% means most of the material is not yours. That's not a grade. That means that's the amount of material from the sources that you used. That means it is 1% of it is yours. We don't want that. We want it the other way around. Okay. Okay, so that's the rubric. And then these are that's the written assignment. So now the next thing that you have left is your live classroom word or phrase that you click on this, and then you begin. And when you begin, it's going to take you to a place where you can put the key phrase or word, and then it will submit it. Okay. So now let's go into the topic for the week. So we're going to deal with domestic terrorism, obstruction of justice, resisting arrest, fleeing police, and then disorderly conduct and free speech. So what is terrorism? Terrorism, as the FBI defines it, is, as it says here, it is unlawful force against a person or property. And the purpose for this crime is to intimidate a body of government or the civilian population in furtherance of a political or social objective. Some people say that organizations like Black Lives Matters are in that category, but that's not true, because Black Lives Matters has nothing to do with terrorism. Now, there are people who will come to Black Lives Matters rallies and incite, and those individuals are set to make the organization look bad. What we're talking about are organizations like the Ku Klux Klan, the Nazis, or Antifa, or Al-Qaeda. Those are the kinds of groups that we are talking about. It's interesting that someone said to me that has the Republican Party turned into an organization of terrorism based upon the current president of the United States? It is quite clear that if you don't agree with what he says, he will freely criticize you. And then some of his followers, which come out after that, like the Proud Boys or these other groups that come out, like the terrorists in, I think it was South Carolina, Charleston, where the woman was killed, where the president said there were very fine people on both sides, which I never considered that a very good statement. And just for your information, it was that particular incident that caused President-elect Joe Biden to enter into the race, because he was done with politics after his last run for president and having served his 2 terms as vice president. But he was motivated because that was a terroristic activity, and he didn't particularly care for that. And I agree with him and appreciate him for taking the commitment to step up, and you know what the results were. But I heard the other day out of the mouth of a supporter, actually a lawyer, saying that one of the Mr. Krebs, who was the head of working in Homeland Security, who said that the elections were fair and just, and the lawyer said that he should be shot. He said he was joking, but you know what, people, you don't play with that kind of activity, especially in the situation that we find ourselves in this country, because there are some people who respond to that on a serious level. And it's very serious. I noticed today that the Attorney General, William Barr, has come out now and said that there was no fraud in the election. Let's see what's going to happen from there. It's interesting, the people that, and then he's now attacking his own governors for declaring the vote. But anyway, that's all political. But here's my whole point, people, when I'm talking about this, is because I've seen activities or threats aimed at people like Dr. Fauci and other individuals. I forget the young man who wrote the book about it, the president, where he revealed who he was later. But anyway, the point of the matter is that we can't have this kind of activity in this country. And so you can't coerce individuals with terror, threatening those individuals. And notice it says terrorism can also be targeted at a specific cause or at a specific entity, which is a terrorist act on a state government, but it can also affect individuals themselves. So we are in a society, unfortunately, where there are people out here who will actually want to take steps. Like, for example, you know about those people in Michigan who the FBI uncovered. They uncovered a plot to kidnap and murder the governor of Michigan because of her stance regarding protecting the people from COVID-19 and closing down parts of the state or organizations for the protection. That's terrorism. So international terrorism is known as an act to human life that occurs outside of the United States or upon our own soil, by a foreign terrorist. That happened September the 11th, right here on our soil. That is an example of that. That is also, there's also an example of what happened at Pearl Harbor in 1941. That is also another form of terrorism that meets all the requirements. So anyway, that it says dangerous, occurs outside the U.S. or upon American soil or territories, that are a violation of the laws of the state or jurisdiction where it occurred, that appear to be intended to intimidate or coerce a civilian population, influence the government, or affect the conduct of government by mass destruction, assassination, or kidnapping. That's international when it's dealing with an organization, a foreign organization. Domestic terrorism, on the other hand, is conducted by terrorists who are within their own country and carry out against citizens, government, or any segment. That's what I've been talking about earlier. And their objective is similar to international, to adversely affect the individuals who they disagree with. Some examples are the Olympic Park bomber. Some examples of that happened in 1995, the Oklahoma City bombing, which Timothy McVeigh, and I always forget his partner's name, who targeted the federal building in Oklahoma City, resulting in 168 people being killed and injuring 600 men and women and children. There was a daycare within there, and they were killed or injured. And the reason for McVeigh's actions was about an incident that happened at Ruby Ridge in Idaho, where a federal agent was killed along with a 14-year-old child. McVeigh thought that the Ruby Ridge incident was improperly handled and the death of the 14-year-old child was unnecessary. And that's the kind of terrorism that happened in our country, as I was talking about in Michigan and in other places. There have been people who've called for the assassination of people because they do something in government that they don't like. So who investigates this? Well, normally it's the federal level, the FBI, maybe the CIA, or Homeland Security. However, it is a joint effort between the federal, state, and other local authorities to find individuals. For example, the Oklahoma City bomber, Timothy McVeigh, he was arrested or stopped for a minor violation, and he was apprehended. Eric Rudolph, who dealt with the Olympic Park bombing by a police officer who was checking behind a closed strip mall and found him lurking in the area. And so the federal government works together with the local authorities to arrest individuals. And so it is important that all of our agencies work together to protect the sovereignty of our nation. Overthrowing of the government is kind of like what we're talking about. Obstruction of justice. So what is obstruction of justice? Well, think about this, and you're going to hear this from me. Obstruction of justice is more than lying. but includes deliberately misleading police or withholding information that prevents government from effectively investigating crime matters. Can happen during a formal criminal proceeding and on the streets. So now, let me show you what I'm talking about. In a formal criminal proceeding, you take an oath or affirmation to tell the truth, the whole truth, none but the truth. This happens also in hearings before government entities, and also you find yourself committing perjury. Now, so you take that unlawful oath, you take that oath or affirmation to tell the truth, but instead you lie. That is why the cases that involve the president and his legal team took to the media to share their statements about the election that just took place in November. But as you know, almost unanimously, cases were thrown out of court because when they went into court, they would not proceed there with the same theories, because if they did, it could be considered as perjury, or it could be obstruction of justice. It could be a point where you are lying to the judges, and that is a bad move because of the fact that when you're an officer of the court, as attorneys are, you can be held responsible for that. In fact, they should be held responsible for statements like that Genesee that said that Krebs should have been shot. You don't joke. Just like, for example, you don't jokingly post or say you're going to kill the president. You have to be careful with that because the FBI will be at your doorways because of that. Anyway, so obstruction of justice during criminal proceedings pretty much have to do with people who perjure themselves on the stand, and they can find themselves violating the law and going to jail. That's what people like our Governor Blagojevich, that's what happened with people who were in the president's team or cabinet, such as Manafort, such as General Flynn, who lied to the FBI. So obstruction of justice, those individuals who find themselves obstructing justice or standing in the way of justice, pretty much is what it means. In the streets, obstruction of justice, when a person deliberately misleads police, and often occurs when a person lies to the police in performance of their duties. Now, people don't have to answer questions, so the Fifth Amendment protects them. But if you do, then you need to be honest and tell the truth, because that can get you in a lot of hot water. We had a famous case here in Illinois that went nationwide and even international, involving a TV star by the name of Jesse Smollett from Empire, and he led the police to believe that he was attacked by two white guys wearing MAGA hats, which were Make America Great hats, or Trump hats, those red hats with the white writing. But it was discovered that it really wasn't the truth, and police spent hours and hours investigating that case to only discover that it wasn't true. And so his case was dismissed by the prosecutor's office, Kim Foxx's office, not herself personally, and because she recused herself. But the point of the matter is that there were other issues that did kind of lead back to her. She was just recently reelected, by the people, so they didn't hold that against her because she did so many other really good things. But the point of the matter is that you don't do that. Filing a false report is a criminal action, and you can see some examples where the statutes, for example, in the state of Kansas, almost everybody has on the books something that if you cover up or mislead the police, it happens when, for example, there have been times when family members, mothers and fathers have killed their own kids and things like this. Yeah, they get them for the crime, but they also get them for obstruction of justice as well. Okay. And then you can go down and you can read some more of this down here. And then dealing with Terry versus Ohio, which you can click on this, or you can go to the fast case and you can see the case itself, Terry versus Ohio, and you'll be able to deal with brief stops, temporary questioning. And there's a statute here in Wisconsin that deals with this, where an individual can be held responsible for lying to the police just by misidentifying themselves. I can tell you there were many individuals that I represented, and most of us criminal defense lawyers would tell you, who when they were arrested by the police, they would give the name of somebody else, which I always thought was a dumb thing, because what you do is you set yourself up for an alias that when you come up before a judge for bail, they will either recognize that you've been in the system by those various names, or what you do is you create an instance where it's harder to get a decent bond. Not to mention the fact that failure to identify laws in many states would require that you provide identification or saying your name. So not identifying oneself is similar to obstructing, but the mere act of failing to identify oneself is also a criminal law violation if it's on the books. Okay. Getting smart alecky, like, what's your name? Who wants to know? You know who wants to know. Just answer the question. Okay. Which I never understood, because when your fingerprints are run, it's going to tell who you are if you've been in the system before. So it's not really something that a smart person, but whoever said that criminals were smart. Remember the definition of a criminal: one who has been caught committing a crime. Somebody says, well, what if a person is not caught? Well, they're not a criminal. And remember the presumption of innocence. And so the point of the matter is if you're adjudicated to have committed a crime, then you automatically, or you plead guilty, then you automatically get that label of criminal. So let's talk about resisting arrest. So this is an issue that is utilized by law enforcement agencies to put charges on individuals who will put up a fight or struggle with an individual who's under arrest. So the person must know that they're under arrest, or is placed under arrest by words or actions, and bring the arrested person under control, such as kicking and spitting, not necessarily complaining, saying that George Floyd, Eric Garner, I can't breathe. There's a stupid statement that's made by the police officer who had his knee on Eric Garner's neck. So if he had that much pressure on him, how could he say and cry out for his mother? That right there means that that officer willingly understood what they were doing. And so it gets to be a point. But how do you know when you're under arrest first, before we get to the resisting? Well, it's very clear when you deal with what we call explicit custody. When the officer says to a person, you're under arrest, that's it. Directs the person, puts their hands behind their back, and places handcuffs on them. That person is under arrest. Implicit custody is less clear and concerned with what a reasonable person would believe. When the individual believes that they are not free to leave, then they may be perceived to be under arrest. So if your liberty is taken away, if you're surrounded by police, for example, and they form a circle, then you're considered to be under arrest if they start asking questions, and it would require the Miranda warnings. But facts, it says here, and circumstances related to implicit arrests are looked at depending on all the surrounding circumstances. And they give an example here that if a detective had been invited inside the home of a suspect to speak with him, and they spoke with him at the kitchen table, this is not arrest or custodial questioning. However, though, if the police officer brought 4 uniformed police officers with him and then surrounded that individual, creating a perception that he wasn't free to move, this restriction could be perceived as arrest. So when your liberty is taken away, or your ability to be able to move. And so one of the key things is that police officers need to understand. I teach my students that when you take the liberty away from an individual, you have implicitly put that person into custody and placed him under arrest. Now, once that takes place, punching or kicking an officer, not just moving. See, some people get this wrong. If a person twists or turn and try to move their arms or something because they say something's too tight, or they can't breathe, that is not resisting. And what unfortunately that the authorities will try to do sometimes is to utilize that as a tool. When I was in the police academy and I was a police officer, that I found myself, and I talked about that in that video that I did, where I was trained to deal with resisting arrest. The key thing that we were taught to do was protect the individual, but also protect yourselves. And so, again, if you, for example, took a person who was spitting and you put a plastic bag over their head, you're opening yourself up for a problem, because they say, well, we did that to keep them from spitting. Yeah, but then you cut off their air supply and they could die. So it creates a problem. But just be aware that resisting arrest is not a felony. It's a misdemeanor, and mostly a Class A misdemeanor. It can stop a police officer from effecting a stop, a frisk, a halt, or anything like that. So you get into eluding police, which we talk about in just a few minutes. We talk about a whole different ball game. Okay. So now let's get into fleeing. Fleeing a police on feet is a common thing that will happen. When a person is running away on foot, the police cannot take out their weapon and shoot that individual. There was once the argument in the 60s that law enforcement could shoot to maim. That is no longer the practice. Just like, for example, the chokehold has been done away with because of cases like Eric Garner. as well as dealing with what happened with George Floyd. But the point of the matter is that when a person is running away from the police and they have a weapon in a situation where they could apparently be threatening other people, then the officer could possibly use force, excessive force. So it says it is inherently dangerous for police to deal with individuals. And so that's what I want to talk about foot chases. More police officers, innocent civilians are seriously injured or killed during vehicle pursuits. That's what we're going to talk about now. And very important. And we are trained in the academy how to deal with pursuits and chases. And usually every department or agency that exists from all the way down to the Mayberry USA or little local should have a written policy that explains what should or should not occur with a vehicle. And the reason for that is because innocent parties, as well as police officers, are injured or killed doing these kinds of chases. And so there is an argument that when the individual is pursued in a car and individuals are killed, that that person who, if they're committing a felony and trying to get away, could be charged with what we call felony murder. I'm not going to talk about that today, but you can look it up. When I taught criminal law with the 11-week class, we talked about that, but we don't talk about that much in this 5.5 course. But it says a person is guilty of fleeing a police officer in a motor vehicle, third degree, when knowing that they've been told by the police to stop, and they take off. And chases take place, and the officer will have speeds. But again, like I said again, there are policies that are established to deal with due regard, which is the degree of care a reasonable person performing duties and acting under circumstances would show. During a pursuit driving, the elements the police have to consider are some common sense things, such as what time of day is it, you know, if it's during rush hour or during the time when people are out, or is it late at night, the amount of traffic, volume of pedestrians, what kind of offense is involved there. Is shoplifting, such as stealing an item from the store, those kinds of things. Is it worth endangering life? The road conditions, the speeds that take place during maybe 70 in a 30 or 25-mile speed zone area is very dangerous. And then, of course, the ability of the police officer's ability to drive. We are taught different techniques. And then there's a sample pursuit policy, which you guys are going to be familiar with because you're doing an assignment. And so anyway, the police have to really be very careful because we don't want to endanger the lives of individuals. Okay, so we have techniques that they teach us that are called like force to stop or induce to stop. So force to stop techniques are like ramming a vehicle, using a full roadblock. And so we will do that. I've done that before as a police officer. In order to use these techniques, deadly force must be justified. The justification for using deadly force is behavior which imminently causes or threatens great bodily harm, the death of the police officer or another. So if a person, for example, is driving at high speed through the roadblock, then we can use our weapons, and that's what they're talking about. So the question is, does the mere act of fleeing from a police officer in a vehicle create an imminent threat of great bodily death or harm? And the answer to the question depends on a case-by-case basis. But here are some examples, such as a fleeing driver suspected of a violent felony. Did you hear that? Increases speed 15 miles above the speed limit, but they stop at lights and use turn signals and so forth. These alone are not overtly dangerous, and you can't ram in those situations. Okay. However, if the same suspect travels at a 90-mile-an-hour speed and then doesn't regard traffic signals and those, then ramming may be justified. And you have to look at the case of the United States Supreme Court, Scott versus Harris, which dealt with this issue. Okay. Came after I was a police officer. So we have techniques that they teach us in the Academy of how to induce, such as the PIT. It's called Pursuit Intervention Technique. And you can see on this that the police car, the basic thing is we want to try to make contact with the back side to turn the vehicle around, those kind of things. But you have to also be very careful about the place and time that you utilize that. Here's another technique that's more secure. We put stop sticks out, and you know about those, because if you drive a car and you pull into a parking lot and you try to get out sometimes without paying, you can run over these and get a flat tire. And so we place these stop sticks across, and if a person goes through, then it will flatten their tires and slow them down so we're able to catch them. Okay. Partial roadblocks, that's what we were talking about earlier. We leave one side open, and this is direct them into an open area, and within the open area, then stop sticks can be put there, forcing the suspect to drive over them. Boxing in, you may have seen that with the O.J. Simpson case, if you're familiar with it, a chase where you have squad cars on all sides, and they force the vehicle to slow down because they're boxed in. Now, if the individual has a weapon, then it is kind of dangerous, because then you put the officers themselves and maybe others in jeopardy. So those are just some of the techniques, and those are back to that. So now we're going to conclude by dealing with disorderly conduct and free speech. You have the right under the First Amendment to say things. However, you have to remember that the First Amendment right is balanced with against maintaining order, such as creating riotous situations, and are putting out what we call fighting words. And so when you get into that particular point and you're dealing with fighting words, and I'm going to give you what I'm talking about. Words, here we go. Fighting words. There is a case, Chaplinsky, Chaplinsky versus New Hampshire, a 1942 case, 315 U.S. 568, said words by their very utterance inflict injury or tend to incite a breach of peace. and they're called fighting words. And so these words have been debated in cases, many cases, since that time. And you can actually do some research and you will find out that 89 case, Texas versus Johnson, where it was established that an 89 Supreme Court case, if there is a bedrock principle underlying the First Amendment, is that the government may not prohibit the expression of an idea simply because it finds it offensive. So just because you don't like it. But the Supreme Court ruled, as I said back in Chaplinsky, that certain words. The Supreme Court first developed the fighting words doctrine. In this case, will involve a Jehovah's Witness. So if you get a chance to read that case, it's noteworthy to understand, and it set the pace for many cases that came after that. So if an individual is creating a disturbance in an area because of the time they may be doing something, or the way they may be doing something, or they're doing something to create, incite other individuals, they could be charged with disorderly conduct or breach of peace by using obscenities, profane, voiceless language that is likely to cause a breach of the peace. That language, of course, generally is held to be directed at an individual. And then maybe a number of people might get involved and a riot takes place. A dictionary that we lawyers use and learn was introduced usually in law school, or paralegals know about it now, is defines terms like riot is defined as a tumultuous disturbance of the peace by 3 or more persons assembling together with the intent to assist each other to commit violence. Okay. And you can read more about this, listen to it in a 35-minute video and so forth. Okay. So that's what I wanted to share with you. These key terms, again, I recommend that you utilize flashcards. I told you why, and run Adobe Flash to make sure that it's allowed. And then you use these scenarios, such as when it occurs in a vehicle, is the act of failing to stop for a police officer after the motorist has received a signal that his lights are signal. What is that about? Fleeing or eluding police. Custody that is less clear and is concerned with a reasonable person would believe, implicit custody. And you can go down each of these and you can apply them to your studies to help you to get ready for the quiz and to understand the module for the week. Then practice for free speech, and you can go through this little scenario and use these practice activities. A man is walking in the middle of the street in a busy downtown entertainment district yelling profanities. Is this considered free speech or disorderly conduct? Probably disorderly conduct, because the man used vulgar and profane language in a public place, and his actions were likely to incite a breach of peace. So you can go through each of these and do the same thing. And then finally, we come down to the practice quiz, which I explained to you, and you know now what I'm talking about because you took a quiz last week. That these questions are oftentimes similar to ones that are on the test. A local resident is suspected of setting off a truck bomb at a religious temple, intentionally targeting parishioners. This is an example of what? The rest, domestic, eco, international, state-sponsored. Remember, a local resident, so that makes it domestic. Remember the shooting that took place in Charleston where the individuals were killed. Remember the incident that took place at the Tree of Life Synagogue, and I think it was the Pittsburgh area. Those are domestic terrorism techniques, things. So anyway, you can do each of these and they will help you. Okay? So now I want to give you a phrase before I let you go that you can use to get your points for this week. And that is obstruction of justice. Just in case it broke up, obstruction of justice. That's the phrase. Okay, and you give me that and get your points. So with that, I'm going to say good night to you. I hope to see you in week 5, which is next week, at Tuesday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard. In the meantime, you know how to reach me if you need anything. I do encourage you again to listen to that video about Springboard to Adversity to Success. It's about an hour or so long, but it chronicles my start when I was a 7-year-old kid all the way up to the present time, about how I made it to the level I have of success in life. Good night. Stay safe as well.